Are you okay?
At 7.
Good evening and welcome to RUOK News on Channel 7. I'm Riley Edwards, here reporting on the hot-button issue of imperialism in India.
And I'm Monty Sanaika. Today's top story shows a controversy halfway around the globe. But first, to keep the wheels from falling off here at Regional Unearthed Obfuscated Knowledge, here's a word from our sponsors, the best school system on earth, Wake County.
Hey Julia, do you know what this means?
No, sure. Hold on, let me check.
I can tell you what imperialism means. I'll teach you. Yes, imperialism is when a stronger, usually stronger, nation state takes over a different area, politically, economically, and militarily, either all those ways or part of those ways. Isn't that fun?
Yes.
This has been a message from Wake County Schools. We would like to thank the best history teacher in the world, Miss Johnson, for appearing on our commercial.
Well, that sure was something, wasn't it, Riley?
Yeah, quite right you are, Monty. Interesting that Wake County chooses to spend money on advertising instead of the busing system.
Good point, but do you know what's even more remarkable?
Imperialism in India. Let's go to field reporter Carrie Ho with the latest scoop.
How has your life changed under imperialism?
The British rule us, but they're not one of us.
It seems as if you have very strong feelings about this. Why is that?
My grandfather and his ancestors faithfully fought for the Mughal Empire for centuries, starting with Akbar the Great in the 16th century. But now young boys from good caste become sepoys for the English East India Company. They are trained in the European ways of war, not the tactics that our ancestors have developed since the beginning of time. Some people do not understand. Being controlled by these outsiders is completely a strip of my family's honor to be under such strong military rule, under such a strong empire. But not for me. No, not for me.
The British aren't all that bad, are they?
Some may say so. Others do not.
Can you elaborate on that?
The British have done many things to disrespect our culture. For example, to load our rifles, we must bite the cartridge. The lining of this cartridge is greased with fat from a pig or a cow.
Why is this offensive to you?
The sepoys are all either Muslim or Hindu. The cow is a very sacred animal to the Hindus, and the pig is a very unclean animal to the Muslims. For the British to force us to consume this is degrading beyond belief.
So how did the sepoys react?
They mutinied. In some places, the sepoys murdered every European they found. They also sieged Cawnpore and killed almost 200 people.
Oh, that's harsh.
The British retaliation was even more brutal. They tied suspected mutineers to cannons and executed them. Now, no matter how dissatisfied we are, we do not dare rebel.
Well, there you have it, Riley. A blessing for some and a problem for others.
Thank you, Carrie, for that insight that you provided into the Indian perspective.
It certainly taught me some history.
We just love learning here at RUOK News.
Indeed. Now we go to Leah with her segment on cooking up imperialism. Yum.
Hi, I'm Leah, and today I will be making imperialistic cupcakes. This is an easy recipe as well as a valuable commodity. The first thing you need to do is preheat your oven to 350 degrees. Then we will start by making the basic vanilla cake batter. Pour in all your necessary ingredients. Use 3 eggs, a quarter cup of vegetable oil, and 1.5 cups of water. Then stir. This basic vanilla cake batter represents India before the British took over. Now we will add the Indian cinnamon. This cinnamon represents the British taking over India. It overpowers the original and traditional taste of the cake. Now pre-grease cupcake tins. Next we will put the Indian batter with the British cinnamon into the metallic cupcake holders, representing the economic and military control of India from the British. Now put it in the oven for 20 minutes. Perfect! Now they need to cool off for a while. If you want to, you can add red icing to resemble that India was the jewel in the crown of the British Empire. Tune in next week for Cooking Up a Colony.
I'm going to make sure to take some of those cupcakes. Here's Carrie Ho with another scoop.
Thanks, Riley. I'm now here with Chandani, who has been recently remarried. Chandani, what do you think about the British influence in India?
Well, my dear husband died in a mining incident a few months ago. But since the British banned sati in 1829, I was not pressured to end my life as well because of his misfortune.
Chandani, what exactly is sati?
Sorry. It is when a wife burns herself upon her husband's funeral pyre. In the past, women were encouraged to end their lives in a show of wifely devotion, but the British have changed all that, for which I am grateful. We are encouraged to remarry as well, and I can continue living my life in safety and happiness.
Thanks, Chandani, for your time. Back to Monty and Riley.
Wow, things really have changed. Can you imagine the outrage if that extension of women's rights was considered the norm?
Indeed, Monty. Indeed. You know, it's an Indian in support of the British. You really don't see that every day.
Certainly, Riley. Oh, thank God. I mean, this just in. British and Indian conflict over a classical game of capture the flag. Reporting on this conflict is Jessica Jingles. Jessica?
Thanks, Monty. It appears that the team captain of the British, Warren Hastings, and the team captain of the Indians, Mangal Pandey, are to be bickering over the loss of India's flag. Here's a clip from their struggle.
The crown jewel of Britain. India, where's your flag?
What do you mean, where's our flag? We didn't know we were supposed to bring one.
So you'll be under our flag then?
We'll just have to fight you so then we don't have to use your flag.
India, that's cute. No flag, no game. Those are the rules.
Nuh-uh, Britain. You didn't have your flag last week and you still flagged.
Poppycock. Such an event never transpired in all of Britain's history. No flag, no game. Those are the rules. That I've just made up. See, now we win with a score of 56-0. The score doesn't lie, India. Now you're still under our banner, you idiots. You can't stay under your Indian princes forever because we'll just conquer them. Alas, your plight continues.
Now we don't have to play the British.
Oh, well, we're Brits now. Isn't that exciting?
No, I hate them.
Who?
The British.
Oh, I can see why you hate them.
Oh, I have a cunning plan.
What is it?
We could boycott the British equipment and only use our own fields.
Wasn't that already a plan by Viceroy Curzon in 1905?
Oh, fine then. Oh, wait. I have another plan. We could start a rebellion. We could overthrow the British armies and their ways.
Yeah!
Why?
What?
Well, it seems pretty silly. The British have done a lot of good for us. They've let widows remarry, and they've brought a lot of technology to us. So it seems silly that you'd want to rebel against it.
They force us to submit to their whims. You are now expected to serve in places that you are unfamiliar with. The Bengal armies have soldiers in the upper castes. The Madras and Bombay armies have more neutral armies. Report to your post now.
All right.
Fascinating information, don't you think so, Riley?
Very interesting, Monty. I can't believe the armies are split by social caste. Very different from our modern military structure.
Yes. I wonder if it was as efficient as our current military.
Maybe our special guest, Mahatma Gandhi, can tell us more. Here's Robin Cornell with more information.
Hello, Mr. Gandhi. My name is Robin Cornell, and we're very happy to have you here in the RUOK News station. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your cultural beliefs and how you became to be a famous political leader in India.
Hello, Ms. Cornell. I am glad to be here as well.
Fantastic. Now, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Well, I grew up in Mumbai, in northern India, under the rule of William Vesey Fitzgerald. I was wed to my wonderful wife Kasturbai at 13 years of age. I like to think of myself as an Indian nationalist who wants what's best for my country. Although I am a Hindu, my philosophies have been influenced by Jainism and other cultures as well.
Could you elaborate some more on your influences?
I spent some time studying law in London, so I believe that influenced my legal perspectives on the British rule. I was raised in an atmosphere with religious influences, and this combined with my legal ideas create my overall ideology about the situation. I have taken some ideas from Plato, William Salter, and Leo Tolstoy's works, and I have translated some of these into my native language, Gujarati.
How do you think the fight for Indian independence was handled?
I am very disappointed at how it was handled. Throughout my life, I pushed for the creation of a unified India that was beyond the boundaries that were created by religion, and I still hope that one day we can unite India under a common cause.
I'm glad that we've learned about your truly inspiring philosophies, but I have to ask you, who opposes them?
Though all people start out with equal and full respect, some have earned their way out of this regard, I hold by default. The most notable example of this concept is Winston Churchill. Winston Churchill inhibits the progress of India's freedom and liberty.
How did Mr. Churchill affect you?
Churchill opposed all efforts to make India politically independent, including my peaceful attempts. Churchill even disagreed with giving India political power under British control. Plus, he looks like a baby.
Very profound. I've never heard it said like that. I mean, I've always thought that, but I've never heard it put so eloquently. Thank you so much for this interview, Mr. Gandhi.
You're very welcome, Mrs. Cornell.
It's always important to hear the suppressed point of view, don't you think, Riley?
I always love to hear both sides of the story. It helps gain perspective over the controversy as a whole. But I heard we have another important activist in the studio today. Is that true?
Yes. A famous author and commentator of the Indian struggle, Dadabhai Naoroji, is now with our interviewer, Colleen Brown. Colleen?
Mr. Nauroji, you are hailed as the great old man of India. An intellectual, you changed both political and social change in your country.
That I did.
In 1867, you established the Indian National Congress. What was your purpose in this?
My colleagues and I hope to introduce the Indian point of view before the British populace and all of their leaders. All in all, it was very successful.
The Indian National Congress would soon grow to be one of the largest political parties in India. Are you proud of that accomplishment?
Absolutely. It was our intention for Indians to develop a voice in politics and society. The Indian National Congress was able to counteract the racism caused by the Ethnological Society of London, which used heavy propaganda in 1866 to prove the inferiority of Indians.
That is a great achievement after all. But you are also known as one of the greatest writers in India during your time period. Can you tell us about that?
Of course. In my book, Poverty and the Un-British Rule in India, I detail the unequal trade between India and the British. Exploitation of resources caused much of the poverty in the lower castes.
Your book is often referred to as nationalist literature. What were your motivations in writing it?
I would consider myself a nationalist, yes. This book does advocate for India, but I was not motivated solely by nationalism. There were political reasons as well. I was the first Asian member inducted into the British House of Commons, where I fought against the draining of Indian wealth into the British Empire. Ultimately, I wanted the populations of both India and Great Britain to realize our plight and to come to a peaceful conclusion in the end.
That's all the time we have today. Thank you, Mr. Naoroji, for coming in. You're welcome.
That was Dadabhai Naoroji, the author of Poverty and Un-British Rule in India, in bookstores near you.
Wow, a nationalist author? I bet his books have some really interesting plots.
His most recent book is some of a rally cry among the Indian Congress Party.
Speaking of which, some members of the Indian Congress Party are live in Town Hall. Here's Jessica with more information.
Thanks, Monty. I'm Jessica Jingles from RUOK Channel 7 News Live, and tonight's moderator for our Town Hall discussion at Inlow High School in Raleigh, North Carolina. Please meet tonight's speakers, Colonel Robert Clive, Mahatma Gandhi, and Ram Mohan Roy. Our first question tonight is for Colonel Clive, a British commander responsible for the conquest of Bengal.
Colonel Clive, you are best known for your overwhelming victory at the Battle of Plassey. Can you give our viewers a little background on this event?
Certainly. We decided that the best way to secure the East India Company's interest in Bengal was to replace the Nawab, Suraj Dowla, with a new one, because he seemed to be sympathetic with the French. And there just so happens to be a long-standing rivalry between the French and the greatest empire in the world, the British. Why? Back when my grandfather was young, he fought the bloody French in the Battle of...
I believe you're a bit off topic.
Of course. Right, moving on. Many of his other officials had turned against him to ally with us, including Mir Jafar, whom we had arranged to be the future Nawab. Joe suspected conspiracy and mobilized an army against us. His force had roughly 40,000 men. At first, we despaired of his ensuring victory, but eventually I became sure we would prevail through might, courage, and unrelenting British enthusiasm with spirit out on the field.
You bribed many of the officials in the Indian army to undermine the Nawab's plans. Do you not consider this a dishonest tactic?
My job was to secure Bengal for the East India Company. I was prepared to do this by any means necessary.
Even means that involve blatant deception and deceit?
Moving on. Ram Mohan Roy, the religious and social reformer known as the father of modern India, will now take your questions.
What influenced your passion for social reform?
My parents came from different sects of Hinduism, which helped me to be more tolerant of religious differences. I myself am very religious, and I believe social and political reform is a way of serving my God.
Even though you're Hindu, you reject many of the traditional beliefs and practices associated with Hinduism. Why is this?
Hinduism has become full of superstition and idolatry that is far from the will of God. I believe that God loves all people equally, so I cannot support the caste system which says that some people are better than others. Also, men and women are equal in His eyes, so practices like child marriage and sati go against His will. Sati is a practice that is not supported by Hindu religious texts, but was added to doctrine later on to oppress women. The same is true of child marriage.
Is your belief in monotheism at all influenced by other religions?
I have studied many other religious texts, including the Bible and Quran. My own sect of Hinduism, the Brahmo Samaj, incorporates some of the elements of Christianity. I believe that God is the central tenet of all religions, and so they all share common elements and can continue to improve and develop by learning from one another.
Thank you, Mr. Roy. We will now speak with Mahatma's Karmakant Gandhi, or as he is known to many Indians, Mahatma Gandhi.
What led you to be so passionate about this march?
For once, I noticed the abuse upon my people caused by the outrageous British salt tax.
That tax was completely justified.
Excuse me, Mr. Clive. That question was for Mr. Gandhi.
That's Colonel Clive to you, miss.
I think someone has a temper. Mr. Gandhi, please continue.
As I was saying, the salt tax outlawing the production of wholesale of salt, transforming it into a complete British monopoly. Not even workers were allowed to collect salt off the coasts. They were instead forced to purchase what they could not even afford. Before I began my 240-mile march, I personally wrote the Viceroy, describing the peaceful rebellion that was about to be put into place. But the response I received was nowhere near acceptable. After the lengthy trek, we finally reached the coast, and, defying the law, I picked a piece of salt off of a rock. A month later, my fellow protesters and I were thrown into prison. What finally transpired were the protests that broke out after our civil disobedience, closing many of the British shops and mills. The non-violence of the Satyagrahis and their deaths inspired the rest of the world to finally allow India's liberation.
What would you say your relationship with Mr. Churchill is?
I would classify Churchill as a tyrant. He subjected an entire country to British rule. We were subverted to pitiful governors who took use of our natural resources and gave little back. The lack of individuality and the right to expression as a country we experienced under their rule was a travesty that fit only the profile of tyranny, and Churchill knew and endorsed this existence.
What do you think sparked this change?
Well, they showed up in 1600. From that very moment, their patron saint, Elizabeth, funded journeys and exhibitions here with the goal to colonize us. At the beginning, it was at least economical with the East India Company. Then they gave power to the British Raj, the Indians who submitted to the British in exchange for power. Now we are being governed by the British talking heads, but not all is lost, while others, like myself, fight for equality and freedom.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi, and good night. Back to you, Monty.
Some very interesting points of view, don't you think, Riley?
Very much so. That Robert Clive certainly seems like an interesting character.
I don't really think I would want to meet him, though.
Completely understandable, Monty. Now, let's wrap up tonight's top story with our regular segment, the Culture Police.
British introduction of evening tea, the cricket craze, social revolution, and couture to kill for. Tonight, we will be discussing British India and the cultural riot that it has caused.
Yes, Katie. Today we'll start off with this photo of a remarried woman and her husband. As we all know, British imperialism has allowed women to remarry instead of performing the ritual sati. Temple?
This shining example of equality gives me hope for this country.
I happen to disagree, Temple. I believe that to disregard the sati disgraces the institution of marriage, as well as disrespects the women's former husbands.
Well, I can see where you're coming from with your traditional values, but haven't you benefited from all the things British have brought to this country? Some European dress is quite flattering, though those corsets are highly uncomfortable to wear.
Now, I know that not all that glitters is silver bullion, but which the British aid to the economy with their East India Trading Company, my husband's production of cotton textiles has gone through the roof. I also suppose the introduction of chai tea and cricket to our home lives is a plus. You know, hospitality is always impressing our guests.
Right, your famed hospitality. Moving on. Not only do we have tea and a new game, we also have an increased literacy rate among the people. Here's a picture of a little boy reading with his father. How cute.
Spread of British English, we've been seeing more and more young people being able to read.
Reading? What about learning more important things, like maintaining the home and learning more traditional methods such as oral narratives? After all, Homer was one of the greatest storytellers of all time. What good can come from writing books? Literacy just creates more problems for our younger generation.
I agree with Robin, and that the English have affected much more than just our literacy rate. Recently, European-only signs have been popping up around the nation.
This sign in a park is a disgrace. How could foreigners come into a country and decide to kick out its natural-born citizens?
What a crying shame, and after all we've done for them with the East India Trading Company.
This is what I've been saying the whole time. How can you not see what the British are doing? They'll gain your trust by coming in with their fancy European clothing and tea, and they'll leave with your dignity.
The social unrest that has been caused by European racism may cause problems in the future. Stay tuned in to RUOK for next week's episode of The Culture Police.
Man, I just love the Culture Police. They just tell us so much about the way things are. Be tuned in for tomorrow evening's show, where we'll be talking about the building of colonies in the Americas.
That's all for tonight's show. Good night from RUOK News at 7.
Stay classy, Tar Heel State.